Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackmon, here with Jacquie Luqman, and we are your number one source for struggle, socialism, and soul. And today on Darker Than Blue, we're going to be talking about a number of very pertinent international issues. First, starting off with developments inside Haiti. And we are very happy to be joined by Dr. Jemima Pierre, the Haiti Americas coordinator for the Black Alliance for Peace. Dr. Pierre, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And Dr. Pierre, there's been some pretty serious developments inside Haiti here lately. Here recently, the unelected Prime Minister, Dr. Ariel Henry, actually resigned his position. And in his place, there is set to be a new scheme backed by the United States to impose what seems to me would probably be just another puppet government in Haiti called the Transitional Presidential Council. And my understanding is that this will basically be set up in Haiti. It won't be voted on by the Haitian people. It will be set up by officials from the United States, France, Canada, along with some governments in Africa and the Caribbean that are basically in the pockets of Washington. And so I was hoping you could help us understand more about this presidential transitional council. What do you think it means, and how you see the resignation of Henri sort of factoring into conditions in Haiti right now?
Well, first of all, you can't resign from the position that you weren't supposed to be in to begin with. So, and also part of this discussion around resignation is the U.S. basically took out its own puppet that it had put in place. I mean, remember, after the assassination of Jovenel Moïse, there was no prime minister. There was an interim one. He had named Henri, but Henri had not been ratified. And so he died. He was assassinated 2 days before Henri was put in. 2 days before the Henri had to be ratified. And so then what happens then is the core group, which is the real gangsters of Haiti, the cabal of European powers, including and Brazil. The core group decided who would be our prime minister, and they sent out a communique stating that they decided that Ariel Henry would be prime minister, and then the U.S. has been supporting him ever since. So there's that. This presidential council is interesting in the sense that what the U.S. has managed to do is get a bunch of Black countries and Black people to hide its gangsterism, right? And so it's hiding behind CARICOM, which is, I won't tell you what I call them off air, but these CARICOM countries who basically have agreed to basically play the puppets for the U.S. And so once the armed groups in Haiti basically scuttled plans. So I guess we have to go back, right? Because part of what's happened is there have been armed groups in Haiti for a while, and where politicians and rich people, because it's the rich, non-Black elite that own the ports that bring the guns in, that have armed the groups. Jovenel Moïse had his own armed groups. The prime minister, the president before, Michel Martelly, when these armed groups decided that they would change the U.S. was planning to bring a mission, a non-UN, and we can talk about this later, non-UN military invasion of Haiti, even though it got the blessing of the UN. And so, and basically supposedly led by Kenya, but really, the U.S. was paying Kenya $200 million to come in to send 1,000 police. But the whole point of this mission was to prop up this unelected, unpopular Ariel Henry from 2022. And it got snagged in the courts when Kenyan people, some people in Kenya started protesting, and then the former Supreme Court justice brought it to Kenyan courts, and the Kenyan courts halted the mission and said that they needed to have a bilateral relationship. Mind you, Kenya and Haiti did not have any diplomatic relationships all these years, right? So they had it under the purview of the U.S. And so I don't think the U.S. expected this. Usually the U.S. can just push its foreign policy in, but I don't think it expected this setback by the Kenyan courts. And so then it frantically flew Abayome all the way to Kenya to sign this bilateral agreement with William Ruto, who we can also talk about it later. But um, and in order to basically deploy this armed foreign, I'd say really mercenary force almost to Haiti. But on the way back, I think the armed groups decided that they did not want the armed invasion, but they also did not want Abayome, so they blocked the airports. And so then the U.S. had to scramble. So it was while he was flying back, he had stopped in the U.S. Abayome, and then he was about to fly back, and apparently he thought he was going to, when he realized the airports were closed, he was going to stop at the Dominican Republic, and then take a helicopter across to Haiti, because apparently our airspace is wide open and people could just fly in and out. He's going to take a helicopter into Haiti, but then the U.S. Secretary of State calls him on the plane. He was in the charter plane, and basically told him he had to resign. And then he ended up in Puerto Rico. So the U.S. controls everything that's happening in Haiti. So let's be clear, because Haiti's under occupation. We've talked about many times before in other shows. And so then the U.S. then is caught off guard. And so then they have to scramble. And then they get the CARICOM people who've been on board for this foreign invasion of Haiti, which is terrible, right? These Black countries. And then they say they're going to have a meeting and they're going to create a political transition for Haiti. How do you have a political transition that is made? So they meet, by the way, in Jamaica, Monday, 2 weeks ago, I think. They meet in Jamaica, and it's the core group. It's the U.S., France. Can we ask why France is in this meeting? France is all the way in Europe, right? So why is it part of this meeting? So it's the U.S., France, Canada, Brazil, which is, people's favorite Lula, which is behind this armed occupation as well, and Mexico, which helped write the original bill to bring an armed occupation into Haiti. So these people are meeting. So you have Brazil, US, France, Canada, Mexico meeting with the Caribbean stooges, the CARICOM people, without any Haitians present. So they have a secret meeting amongst themselves for about 3 hours, and then they call in, I think they Zoom in some of the Haitians that they had already handpicked. And then Mia Motley, who's like, I think the Prime Minister of Barbados and the UN darling, basically set the parameters and basically told the Haitian participants that they allowed at the table that the only way that they can negotiate is if they agree that the first action that will happen under this presidential commission is allowing in a foreign invasion force into Haiti. So tell me that this is about Haitians, because it's not. Don't tell me that it's about Haitians, because it's not. Because how do you negotiate a presidential council when you tell them that the parameters of the negotiation are already set by the imperialists?
I mean, and when people really delve into the actual history of Haiti, and then they look at the current manipulations by the core group, and manipulations is not a strong enough word. Interference and destabilization, I think, is what they've really done. Then people begin to see. I hope people begin to see the ridiculousness of this a proposed invasion, because now, after apparently the second in command to Jimmy Barbecue Cherezier was killed, and now people are starting to ask questions that make sense, but they shouldn't be questions because everybody knows the answer to them, right? So, the Republicans are saying they're not going to fund this US-backed invasion into Haiti. Biden is asking for $40 million for the operations. The Republicans are not willing to give up that amount of money, but it's not because, they think it's wrong and imperialism is bad or anything like that. It's because they just don't want to spend the money, which is fine. But then the fact that it's Republicans who bring up the issue of there are guns in Haiti that aren't produced in Haiti, ammunition in Haiti that isn't produced in Haiti. So if we figure out where these guns come from in Haiti, maybe we can put an end to some of this violence. And I mean, it's a ridiculous statement, Dr. Pierre, not because it's not true. It is true. And it's something that you and others have been saying about Haiti from the very beginning. People are fussing about guns, but nobody's talking about how the guns get into Haiti. Now Republicans have brought that up, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, but is this the perfect moment for us to go full, see, told you, this is the problem mode, understanding that Republicans are not going to provide any solutions that are better. They're not going to do anything about American guns being, transported to Haiti. What do we do with this moment where I think they accidentally told the truth about the guns?
Well, I mean, the point is to take advantage of these contradictions that emerge, right? Take advantage of that moment when the ruling elite are at each other, especially during election year, and to really point out these things that we have been saying. And the people that are left out of the pictures, right? The horrible pictures that we keep seeing. And and I just, as an aside, just really point out how racist and horrible the images about Haiti are. And I think, the other day I was watching this show on the Western media, and they were showing pictures from the earthquake as if that's Haiti now. So let me just, call out the cannibal calls and this, first of all, they're creating the narrative, because the media to me is as complicit in imperialism and genocide as the rest of the ruling elite, right? So the Western media is very complicit in this. So they create this image of savagery, even though the violence that you see is localized in the capital city. Haiti is a country of 13 million people. There are about 2.5 million people in Port-au-Prince, where you have these armed groups there. But what the images that are left out of this are the white and Levantine oligarchs that own these ports, that have been arming these groups. In fact, if you watch, I'm in enough family and group WhatsApp to show where these armed guys are saying, so and so, Andre Aped, this oligarch, you paid me to do this year at this time. So people are calling out, these young people, armed people are calling out these oligarchs, because they know that they're the ones that have been arming them, and they know that, and those people stay out of the picture, right? They don't get any play there. And I do think there is something to be said about taking advantage of this moment, because the other point is, they're showing these images. Meanwhile, we have a major genocide happening in Gaza. But there have been more UN Security Council meetings on Haiti than there have been on Palestine. And you have to think about, well, what's the plan here, right? What's and part of it is the security mission is part of the U.S. grand strategy. If people need to look up the Global Fragility Act, the U.S. has a 10-year plan for the region, where it basically rewrote its Monroe Doctrine. And it's basically saying the whole point is because U.S. invasion doesn't look good, which is normally, the U.S. would have sent a couple hundred Marines, shot up a bunch of people, and call it a day, because that's what they usually do to Haiti. But I think they're creating a new strategy where they're bringing willing partners, right, to help them. And basically, so once they get the willing partners to push for intervention and so on and so forth, then when they do bring in the forces, they will already have buy-in. So the Global Fragilities Act is basically bringing together of the USAID, the Department of Defense, and the Department of State, and these stooges like CARICOM, and in countries like Mexico and Brazil, to basically provide cover for the U.S. as it implements its 10-year phase of taking control militarily of the region. So this is where we are. So that's one thing. The other part, though, is thinking about the mission. So everybody's like, Haiti needs help right now. What do you do? Let's talk about what the solutions are that these people are presenting for Haiti. They're only presenting one solution, and it's violence. They're sending a military force of what almost might as well be mercenaries coming in with an ill-advised plan. This mission is non-UN, which means that there is no accountability. So if a Kenyan soldier or Kenyan police shoots up a neighborhood and kills a bunch of people, there is no accountability. So mind you, when we had a UN-sanctioned so-called peacekeeping mission, they brought us cholera and killed thousands. They sexually exploited people. So people who are doing this solution, this intervention force that has no clear objective, no clear end date, nothing. And this is the solution that everybody wants Haitians to take. That's outrageous.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to be sure to sort of highlight, Doctor, is the backdrop of the ongoing resistance and organizing in the streets of the Haitian people, who for years have been bravely resisting this imperial imposition that has been going on in their country for so long. I mean, most recently, over the last couple of years, we talked to you a lot about the protests against Jovenel Moise and the corruption there, to say the very least. And it seems that at least a part of the motivation of this transitional council is to try to continue to quell and suppress that resistance. But I wanted to swing back around to the question of Kenya and William Ruto, which you mentioned a little bit earlier in our conversation. And it seems that this US-led effort wanted to put a black face on this invasion, because imperialism is very aware of the optics of yet another occupation of Haiti by either the US or European countries. And so a quick sort of superficial fix to that is to get some black country to do it. But I mean, why Kenya? And why, I mean, we're not in the mind of William Ruto, but why would an African country, Kenya, otherwise even be open to this?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that the US tried to get Brazil to lead it 2 years ago. Brazil said no. They tried to get Canada to lead it. They said no. And then they tried to get the CARICOM countries, and those said no, but they said that they would provide soldiers, right? The US went to Kenya because Kenya is desperate, and William Ruto is the biggest neo-colonial stooge there is for me, as far as the African continent is concerned. Kenya is broke. They need the money. In fact, what's holding up the mission right now is the fact that Kenya says they need to be paid up front, right? And and I don't know if you noticed, as soon as Kenya said that they would, do this mission, Secretary Lloyd Raytheon Austin went to Kenya and signed a 5-year security deal with Kenya. And so part of that is, I think, is they're doing it for the money, but they're also, when they sent a mission over there to check it out, when the US flew some Kenyans to Haiti to check it out, they came back and they said, oh, I think we're just going to cover infrastructure, because they realized it was a terrible situation to be put in. And the US said, no, you can't change the rules. And so the US is controlling Kenya because the US has the purse strings and Kenya is broke. But also, we should be very disappointed and really point out the reality that Black people, Africans, are allowing themselves to be used as the face of US imperialism against Haiti, of all places, right? And so I do think, it's a conversation to be had around this notion around Pan-Africanism, but the fact that the only time that Kenya thought about Haiti was through the US State Department and US Department of Defense tells us everything we need to know.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you, Dr. Jemima Pierre, so much for joining us today. And we're going to keep the movement moving on now to talk a little bit about Cuba. And we are very happy to be joined for this conversation by Gloria LaRiva of the Jacquie Project and the Cuba and Venezuela Solidarity Committee. Gloria, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Sean. Thank you for the invitation, and nice to hear the sisters speaking about the issue of Kenya and Haiti. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Gloria, here recently, we've seen some protests taking place in Cuba over worsening conditions in that country, specifically food shortages and blockades and things like this. And as is typically the case, the Biden administration and the corporate press immediately leapt into action, attacking the Cuban government and its socialist revolution and things like that. I mean, it sort of reminds me of back in July of 2021, when there were protests there as conditions worsened under the coronavirus pandemic. And I mean, this was amplified by thousands of bots on social media. There was a whole, music cultural offensive. I mean, it was pretty intense. And the Cuban president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, has responded to this in part, saying, quote, "The revolution is very solid. We are very serene, calm, and no one will stop us in the advancement of our project." Now, conditions in Cuba are in fact dire, and they do seem to continue to be getting worse. But what always seems to be missing in these conversations, Gloria, is the centrality and really the root of the U.S. blockade of Cuba, which has now been going on for over half a century, of course, directed by the United States. So I was hoping you could help us understand, sort of the real context of these protests and the Cuban government's response to it and how the U.S. factors in.
Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate the opportunity because what we only see in the U.S. news what is happening in Cuba when it's something that can be portrayed negatively, or when there are difficult situations and people are responding. You never hear of all the efforts of the Cuban people to continue with their socialist project and the great victory, for example, that they had in 2021 in developing. It was the only country of the global South, known as the Third World too, the only country outside of Europe and the US that produced its own vaccine for COVID. And why last August until the year before, for a full year up until last August, not one person died of COVID because the whole country was vaccinated. So the doctors and scientists saved the nation, as President Diaz-Canel had said. But it's true, the situation is very hard. Now, it's been 62 years of blockade. Ever since John Kennedy signed on February 2nd, 1962, the law that basically declared a blockade. We call it blockade in the progressive movement and not embargo. It's an official word, embargo. They use it in the United Nations and in the media, the US government. But embargo really means the ban on trade between two countries, or a ban from one country against another. The United States blockade, an economic war, encompasses dozens of laws, encompasses a whole array of weapons against the Cuban economy. And the worst element of this blockade is what was signed into order by President Biden on his second day of office. It's called designating Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism, or a sponsor of state terrorism, SSOT. I will refer to it as SSOT for short in this program. But the SSOT means that every country in the world is banned from having any engagement with Cuba, whether it's banks. They're not allowed to have any transactions from Cuba. And Cuba's an island. But even if it weren't an island, every country has to be able to have transactions with banks, financial institutions abroad in order to deposit money, in order to purchase things for the country. And bank after bank after bank have been shut down because they are threatened with sanctions. And many of them have been fined by billions of dollars by the US government. There are 4 countries that are designated as being state sponsors of terrorism. And again, they're all false labels. It's a political weapon, and that's Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. But what's taking place even worse right now is that Congress people in Florida, Cuban American, very right-wing, who publicly lead the fight in Congress against Cuba, but they're not the tail that wags the dog. It's US imperialism. But anyway, Maria Elvira Salazar, she's a congresswoman who was just a TV personality in Miami with a very right-wing TV program. And so she became congresswoman. And she's sponsoring a bill called the FORCE, the Force Act, in which she's trying to make this designation against Cuba, against false, permanently as law, that can only be lifted according to that act when the US president decides that Cuba is a democracy, which is another example of neo-colonialism, colonial kind of domination. And Cuba refuses to accept this. But the result of the SSOT since 2021, when Biden became president, means that Cuba has a very, very much more difficult time to purchase items from abroad. Most corporations in the world now are refusing to do business with Cuba because they're afraid of falling into incompliance with the US government. And there's so much to say about that. But we can't let Trump off the hook either, because under Trump's administration, there were 243 economic measures waged against Cuba that are all still in existence. So today you saw on Sunday a protest, a gathering of people in Santiago de Cuba. They didn't march, they were gathered in a plaza and in about 3 other cities. Not large, they weren't massively large, they were several hundred people. And the reason they were gathered in Santiago and other towns is because for days and days there has been a very massive blackout in much of the country. Why? Because the Antonio Guiterres power plant, which is the main plant of the country, and it was built in 1988, and they're all the electrical power is very deteriorated, but also because they have shortages of fuel to run those plants. And so it was down for 17 days for maintenance. If the if the country hadn't maintained it as they did for 17 days, nonstop work by the workers, a very heroic effort, it would have basically collapsed permanently. And so people became patient. The weather is very hot right now in Cuba. There are shortages of food, milk, bread. The US has also targeted greatly under the SSOT, Cuba's tourism. For example, people don't know this, but since Biden's law that he signed into being, or actually measure, any European or someone from any other country in the world who plans to come to Cuba, if they travel to Cuba and they plan to go to the United States, they have to know that they will have to now apply for a visa that may be denied because they went to Cuba. So, business people, tourists, a lot of them forced to choose between going to Cuba or the US will choose not to travel to Cuba. So Cuba's tourism, which is a huge source of income, has also been hit. Cuba's international medical professional services, where thousands of doctors go abroad to the countries that have resources, they pay Cuba for the services of those doctors who provide free healthcare. And the US is working nonstop to force countries to expel those Cuban doctors. So that's a big loss of hundreds of millions of dollars for Cubans' healthcare. So excuse me for explaining this for a while, but it's an enormous array of actions against Cuba, designed to try to overthrow the Cuban Revolution.
Yeah, and as we watch some of us,
Absolutely. And Gloria, you talked about the this executive order that was issued by then President John F. Kennedy. And I think a lot of Americans aren't aware that even prior to that, in 1960, there was a memo that was drafted. It's now declassified by a U.S. diplomat named Lester D. Mallory. And I encourage people who are not familiar with this memo to look it up, because it literally is the blueprint for the U.S. blockade. And Mallory was very clear about what the blockade should do. It said that it said there should be, quote, Every possible means should be undertaken promptly to weaken the economic life of Cuba. If such a policy is adopted, it should be the result of a positive decision, which would call forth a line of action which, while as adroit and inconspicuous as possible, makes the greatest inroads in denying money and supplies to Cuba to decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of government. So the United States has always been 100% clear that cruelty is the point of the blockade, because they hope that if conditions get bad enough, then the Cuban people will reject the socialist revolution and overthrow the government. And then Washington will finally be able to come in and claim its prize. This is how it sees Cuba. And not just since the revolution either. The US has been trying to control Cuba for a very long time, centuries even. And so the narrative in the US, though, and the narrative that the propaganda that goes out to the world is that well, first of all, there's this quibbling that happens that you sort of talked about a little earlier. You know, people play this, you know, this game about, well, it's not a blockade, it's an embargo, and you sort of described why the word blockade is actually most appropriate. But there are people who believe that conditions in Cuba are the way they are because of cruelty and greed and corruption within the Cuban government. And of course, this is all a tactic to undermine the legitimacy of Cuba and its revolution all over the world. And I feel like I should point out that even with the pressures of the blockade, I mean, what Cuba has been able to do for its people and what it's been able to contribute to humanity, I think is more than impressive. You know what I mean? But you know, this propaganda that we're talking about is the complete opposite. But you know, again, Washington has always been very clear about what it desires for Cuba, and the program that was set forth by Mallory and then made manifest by Kennedy is clearly at the root of what we're seeing happen in Cuba today with these ongoing attacks from the United States. And so my question, Gloria, is why has the United States for so long and so intensely attacked Cuba in this way? Why is it so important for Washington to control this small island nation in the Caribbean?
It is a small island. So why does the US do this to a small island like this? It has no consequence on the United States. It's because it is an example. The US has been terrified about the fact that ever since the revolution of 1959 and the process of socialization of the revolution in the next 2 years was that the property that was basically stolen by big agribusiness and other corporations, taking land, taking property, taking the wealth of the island from the time that the takeover from Spain took place in 1898, and the enormous wealth that the capitalists got, to have a socialist revolution 90 miles away from the US territory, to have an example of a country that has completely free healthcare, completely free education, where landlordism was eliminated, is a very dangerous example. And it was an example to all of Latin America and later the third world. But that's why the US, with Lester Mallory, I'm glad you mentioned that memo of April 9th, 1960, which was only revealed recently, where it was part of the proposal and became the program beginning with Eisenhower and was continued with every other president. And only one time during Jimmy Carter's presidency, where he actually lifted the travel ban, allowed Americans to go unrestricted, and other measures as well. That was, and some lifting of some elements of the blockade by Obama. But other than that, it's been one long aggression against Cuba. The US uses examples, the main one saying we have to bring democracy to Cuba. Well, if it's the kind of democracy we have in the United States, with one of the worst expressions being Trump and Biden again, the warmonger Biden and the racist neo-Nazi Trump, I don't think the Cuban people want that kind of democracy. It's the democracy of the workers in power, where landlords don't rule, but the tenants' right to have housing rules. Where universities are not corporations, but learning institutions, where a person has a right to learn. And example, but also it's Cuba's example internationally. In the 1970s, when South Africa was invading Angola, a socialist country at that time, but in any case, invading another country, the apartheid regime was brought down to its knees by Cuba's 300,000 soldiers who volunteered to defend Angola, which helped lead to the freedom of Namibia, helped lead to the end of apartheid, which was led by Black South Africans for many, many years. But the U.S. was on the other side. The U.S. was backing South African apartheid, like they're backing apartheid Israel today. And Cuba was on the other side, Cuba for real freedom. So at that time, the U.S. officially said, we're blockading Cuba because they're in Angola. And then later they said, now they said they're passing this state sponsor of terrorism label that they imposed it in 2021. And the claim was because Cuba is giving refuge to Colombian terrorists, which was a complete lie. What Cuba was doing for a number of years was hosting peace negotiations between the FARC, later the ELN, the guerrilla forces in Colombia, with the Colombian government. There was a peace negotiations going on to stop decades of violence in Colombia. And Norway was a co-sponsor of the negotiations in Cuba. The popes lauded the efforts of Cuba, but the US used that to say they're housing terrorists. The very opposite. And we can't talk about terrorism without mentioning that Cuba is the victim of long-standing US terrorist activities, bombings, assassination, biological warfare, and I think the worst terrorism of all, the blockade.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, Gloria. So as we're watching
And
the
Gloria, you
continued, what is
mentioned
happening?
how the U.S. Is sort of engaging in this one long aggression against Cuba, and you also sort of brought in almost a comparison in terms of Washington's orientation in support of apartheid Israel. And I was wondering if you see a connection there between sort of this struggle for Cuba to free itself from sort of the shackles of imperialism, if you will, and the Palestinian struggle for liberation. And there's actually a long relationship between Cuba and Palestine. We've seen Palestine demonstrations inside Cuba. There are a lot of students there, and things like this. And as we mentioned earlier, before we were talking about Haiti. And so, how do you see these countries who have similar histories of colonialism and attacks by imperialism? How do you sort of see their struggles as kind of interconnected in that way?
Thank you. I think the connectedness in one part is how the parties in these struggles see themselves. For 32 years now, it'll come up in the fall this year, but since 1992, at the United Nations General Assembly, where all the heads of state of the 193 countries come together to deliberate and give their nation reports, since 92, the majority of states have voted on the resolution that calls for the US to end the embargo blockade. And the numbers increase every year in the favor of Cuba. Last year, 187 countries voted on Cuba's side to say, lift that blockade, lift it. The two countries that voted against Cuba were the US and Israel. That's not an accident. And Cuba does not have relations with Israel, broke relations off in 1967. And Cuba has had massive demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people in these last months since October 7th.
Mhm.
That puts Cuba in a disadvantageous position with regard to the United States. But Cuba has such a principle of international solidarity with the oppressed peoples of the world that they do not shake from that position of supporting Palestine. You've had massive marches along the Great Malagón Seawall of many tens of thousands. And the president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, has led those marches. And Raúl Castro has also been visible. I would say that the South African regime of apartheid, until it was dismantled as an apartheid regime, Cuba stood with the people of South Africa and Nelson Mandela. And that's why the first country that Nelson Mandela visited after getting out of prison and becoming president was Cuba. But in addition, Israel is a gendarme in the Middle East against the Arab countries and against Iran and anyone who stands up to the US. But in addition, Israel has helped finance and train the reactionary governments from Guatemala to others to help the repression there against the indigenous when the United States couldn't do it. So the US and Israel are bound together while Cuba is bound with the peoples of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Cuba's actions are seen and appreciated greatly by the Palestinians, including that many Palestinian youth have been trained to become medical doctors in Palestine. They're today in Gaza and they're today in the West Bank.
I mean, that's not a state sponsor
Yeah,
of
and
a
I
terrorism.
also
I'm
wanted
not
to
sure.
ask you, Gloria, since you're with the Cuban Venezuela Solidarity Committee, Venezuela, I believe, has actually recently had an election, which, of course, places it once again within the crosshairs of U.S. imperialism. Not that it's ever really out of the crosshairs. This is another sort of typical thing that we see from U.S. imperialism in Latin America. So I was hoping you could tell us some about those elections and kind of what do you think we should understand about them and how Washington is orienting towards them?
Well, the fiasco for the United States of naming a puppet, Juan Guaido, in 2019, when the U.S. thought that it was time to finally create a fiction of a different president other than Nicolas Maduro, the elected president. When that failed, now a new election is coming up as required by the Constitution. The date has been set this year for July 28th. And that, by the way, is the birth date of the head of the revolution, Hugo Chavez. So it's July 28th. And the big dispute for the US is that a woman named Maria Corina Machado, who is extremely right-wing, her party is basically fascist. And she was the one in the mid 2015, 2017, and beyond. She was in the streets and calling for people to help wage a counter-revolution, calling for violence against the government. And because of her malfeasance and illegal activities in her political activities, she was convicted. She was convicted and has been declared by the Supreme Court not to be allowed to be a candidate this year. But the US is backing her and demanding that she be allowed to run. It's almost like what they did successfully for the US with Nicaragua in the 1990s after a brutal counter-revolutionary war against the Sandinista revolution of Nicaragua. The US then basically, with all this pressure and killing tens of thousands of people in Nicaragua, they forced the Sandinistas to agree to basically a US engineered election. And they got this right-wing government to basically get elected, but they're not accepting that in Venezuela. Venezuela is a revolutionary government fighting for socialism, and they will not accept the dictates of the US. That's what's taking place right now. There will be many people traveling to Venezuela, including myself and many other activists, to be observers and to witness what is a legitimate election. You know, it's been quoted before that the Jimmy Carter Center in the United States had declared previously in the past that Venezuela's elections are fair and honest. But the US won't accept that. I think we should also keep in mind that Venezuela is deeply sanctioned by the US and is also suffering many hardships. And one of those economic attacks on Venezuela was sanctioning all the ships that had been delivering oil to Cuba until 2019 in exchange for roughly 23,000 Cuban medical doctors who provide, even to this day, free medical care to Venezuelans in their country. So it was an exchange of medical care for oil, and the US under Trump blocked those oil shipments. That's part of why Cuba is suffering.
And let's
now, I want to say there is there's solidarity rising up. Russia is sending a shipload of oil. Mexico has been very helpful too with medicine, with agricultural implements, and help in Cuba's agriculture to help grow food. Many countries are coming to the fore: Venezuela, Iran, but much more is needed. And so that's why I'm the coordinator of the Hatuey project, HATUEY, and we're about to deliver a considerable amount of cancer medications in mid-May for the children of Cuba who have cancer. It's one of many, many needs in Cuba, but international solidarity is very urgently needed right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Gloria, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Sean or Gloria? I do not know what has happened, but I'm gonna
you have a car that you're not using anymore? Help your community radio station by donating your used vehicle to WPFW, where it will be sold at auction.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Your favorite jazz and justice station alive and running. The benefit: you get a tax write-off while supporting quality programming. That's what I'm talking about. For more information, just call 1-866-WPFW.
I don't know what the problem is.
1-866-WPFW car.
What is it?
Absolutely. And we are back here on Darker Than Blue on WPFW. We continue to be joined by Gloria LaRiva. I think we may be having a bit of technical difficulty. Jacquie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. All right, go ahead.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened. The gremlins, the Friday night gremlins were like, look, lady, it's time for wine. But no.
Hi, Jacquie.
How you doing, Gloria? It's so good to see you and have you on and talking about Cuba again, because I wondered, I think we kind of had the same conversation about the last protests that were happening in Cuba and how the Republicans, the right wing, well, I could say white wing, it's the same thing, right wing Cubans in the United States are pushing this narrative that actually did not come from the people in the streets. Because the people in the streets, if I saw and heard what I saw and heard, people in the streets were demanding food and power, food and electricity. Right. And somehow by the time the story gets to Miami, it's now the people were chanting for food, electricity, and freedom. And so there is this narrative cooked up in the United States, again, that the people in Cuba are fighting for freedom and they want an end to the dictatorship and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there seemed to be a lot of infiltration, co-optation of the last, SOS Cuba protest. And I don't think I see that much of that in these protests. Could be wrong, but it almost doesn't matter how clear the people in the streets are, because the right-wing Cubans, the Gusanos and their friends in Congress, they're always going to throw in that claim that the people were in the streets demanding an end to the dictatorship, when really the people are demanding an end to the blockade. Do you see, is it that we in the US are only getting the US narrative, so that's why we don't know that the people in Cuba have a different relationship with their government than we do with this one, right? So people will protest, but you're not going to see a lot of people protesting like, get rid of socialism. That's not what people are demanding. But do you think that is because is it a multifaceted reason why we don't know the truth about the people in Cuba and their relationship with their government? Or is, the US right wing with their acolytes that come from Cuba, are they really just that quick on the draw with the media narrative that they get that narrative out there before we even realize anything happened in Cuba?
Well, thank you for mentioning July 11, which was a different character than what's taking place right now, Jacquie. But as far as the media and what the people know in the US, even if we can have 500 TV stations or more and all kinds of media, on our TVs and in our phones, we're still very ignorant of US policy to other countries. We have no idea in general what the US has been doing to Cuba all these years, because I believe if the people knew how much suffering has been created by US economic war, the biological warfare, and all kinds of other attempts to isolate Cuba, and what Cuba has done for its people, and what it has offered to the people of the US, whether it was Katrina after the hurricane, or training young Americans to become doctors for free, the people would demand a change. They would demand the lifting of the blockade. Because I'll tell you, I speak in many audiences, from young people to mixed audiences, and I always ask people, who's gone to Cuba? A few hands might go up. Who would like to go to Cuba? Just about everybody. People want to know. They're curious. They hear some positive things, but they also hear, oh, it's a dictatorship. Oh, it's a terrible place. The U.S. media, which more and more is in the hands of the Pentagon and the CIA, the U.S. media hides reality. I want to give an example of the access to the truth that we just don't get unless there's a struggle. You never heard Fidel Castro's voice. You never saw him speak. Never heard him in the US, nor Raul Castro, nor the current president. But in 2016, when President Obama went to Cuba to announce, the opening of relations, opening of the embassies after 55 years, President Obama got an uncensored, he spoke as long as he wished, and he spoke for a very long time on national Cuban television. And you can be sure every Cuban was watching that TV show because they wanted to hear what the first sitting US president to visit the island after the revolution was going to say. Is he going to lift the blockade? Are we going to have normal relations? So they could hear Obama's pro-capitalist myths and all his claims for the US government. I mean, the people are trusted enough and they're knowledgeable enough about their revolution and what they fought for to be able to judge for themselves what he was saying. And they were disappointed because they heard him saying and making demands, basically like, hand over your economic power to us, and other things. The myth of being a Black man as president, meaning look at the progress we've made in America. Hello, we still have about 1,000 people murdered by cops, in addition to other things. But with the media, you could go into the street. The polls have shown that people don't want aggression against Cuba in terms of they hear about an embargo, but they don't know how very serious it is. They don't know the full extent of the damage being done to Cubans. Especially in recent years, President Trump, he would give these speeches where he said there will never be socialism in the United States.
That's what he
said. Now
said.
he's saying he's going to root out the Marxists and the socialists and the communists, he says, in his campaign speeches right now. Mm-hmm. He's threatening dictatorship. And the U.S. media is showing the hardships of Cuba without explaining why. They don't talk about the blockade as the main cause, like Sean was saying before. But you're supposed to say, wow, that's socialist. So we don't want that. But I think people in the United States, more and more, with the rise of a youth movement for Palestine, for alternative candidates, socialist candidates, I think that the people of the U.S. are reaching a point where they're saying, this isn't working. Massive drug addiction, racism, growing poverty, evictions, this billions of dollars going to supposedly bring democracy to Ukraine, but killing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians. And now the Palestine genocide, which is waking everybody up to what the U.S. is really doing. We're at a crossroads right now in America. And this is why the work of our organization and others like the National Network on Cuba, Pastors for Peace, IFCO Pastors for Peace, and many groups that are saying, let's lift the blockade. We've got to do this. We've got to end a war against the people that we have no argument with. We must be bridges.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much, Gloria, for joining us today. And that's going to do it for today here on Darker Than Blue on WPFW 89.3 FM here in Washington, D.C. And we will see you next time. Peace.
Stay tuned for News Views with Garland Nixon. And you on Black Power Media, stay tuned for Blackonomically Speaking. Be right back.
WPFW is looking for a new place to hang our hats and microphones.
I didn't
and
mention
we're betting that members of WPF.
She just. Ooh. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. It's me, Jacquie Luqman. Thanks for hanging out for the second feature, for the double feature here in Luqman Nation's Friday night double feature. I guess that's what I'm calling this now. Hope you enjoyed our Darker Than Blue, our show Darker Than Blue tonight. We had Dr. Jemima, Pierre, Gloria, LaRiva, and we had Abayome Azikiwe to come on and talk to us about Niger, But he got called away. He had an emergency, so he wasn't able to join us on Darker Than Blue. So we're going to see if he can come back Friday next week, so we can have him on Darker Than Blue, and maybe I'll have him on here so we can talk more in-depthly about Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, everything that's going on in the continent that we should know and that we need to know. So hopefully we can get Mr. Azikiwe back next week. But today was a great show, really good. Always good to have Dr. Pierre. Always good to have Gloria LaRiva on to talk about everything Cuba, stuff that I did not know until I heard her say it sometimes. So that's always good. And getting back on schedule, getting back on track, I am happy to bring back to the Luqman Nation platform after my recuperation period, Dr. Linwood Tauheed, the People's Economist. And we are so glad to have you back because I know people have been saving up questions.
It is wonderful to be back, and as they say, you look marvelous. You look
thank you so much.
Well and energetic, and it's good to see you.
Thank you. I feel pretty decent today. This has been a decent week. I think mostly I'm just trying to get used to not having a job to go to, which is a bigger. Now I get why it was so hard for my dad to retire. That's he retired from one job, moved to another state, got another job, and then retired from that job. And he's 76.
You
So,
gotta keep moving.
Yeah. It's a very interesting. Just thinking about it, like living in a capitalist system, you think, you're this anti-imperialist organizer and you've decolonized yourself, and here you're sitting here without a job, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? It's like, wait a minute, wait. Oh, I got some more decolonization to do. Okay. Yeah. So much has been happening in the past few months, in the past few weeks. We are fully in presidential campaign season. I don't want to be, but here we are. Because, nobody wanted a rematch between these two people. Nobody. I'm convinced that most people do not want Joe Biden for president again. And the only reason people are entertaining that idea is because, I think the Democrats have drummed up a really good scare tactic with Donald Trump. Now, look, let me make it really, really clear, because I know people like to cherry pick things that folks say, and I don't want to give the wrong impression. I hate Donald Trump. I hate him individually as a person. He is the type of man who I always hate. They are just men like Donald Trump are the kind of men that you don't want to be in the same room with. Even if it's a room full of people, you don't want, because he is that slimy, right? I hate Donald Trump. His so-called policies, absolutely horrible. There was really nothing good the man did. I just, people are like, oh, he gave HBCUs so much money. Well, how come they're still broke? If you're gonna do it, just do it, right? So he hasn't done anything for, in my opinion, for Black people, for anybody who is not a white supremacist, to want to vote for this man. He didn't do anything good for the economy. The economy didn't get better under his watch. Mortgages, rents weren't lower. Pay wasn't higher. He didn't do anything for anybody, especially oppressed people, working class and poor oppressed people, to think that he would be better than Biden then and now. The bad thing is that's the obvious thing, right? That Donald Trump is terrible. But the bad thing is, Dr. Tauheed, so is Joe Biden. And I just don't know. Like, I know that you are probably more I won't say unbiased. because I know that's not true. I know that's not true. But I think you are more diplomatic in presenting this particular part of this issue than me, because I'm just going to tell you right out. I am not going to tell our people not to vote, because I understand how important it is to us historically. It's almost a part of our DNA, right? Even though I understand that our people didn't fight for the right to vote, they fought to live, right? They fought to live like human beings. It wasn't just a fight for the right to vote. It was a liberation struggle that our people fought and won. But I really don't. And I think maybe Dr. Tauheed, that the reason we think this way, Black people in particular, oppressed people in particular, the reason we think this way is multifaceted. I don't think there is one reason that people, particularly oppressed people who've been screwed over by Trump and who've been screwed over by Biden, who were screwed over by Obama. I just like the long line of screwing, particularly working class and poor and Black voters over, unbroken in between the three presidents, as far as I'm concerned. So voting for either one of these people is only going to get us more of the same. That's what I absolutely believe, because I see what Biden's done in the 3 years he's had so far. He continued a lot of Trump's policy. So if the Democrats say that Trump is the devil, how is Biden? You know what I'm...
The devil's assistant.
So, we're in election season. People are terrified, right? I really do believe that there is and it's not just us radicals either, because what's going on in the world right now is so horrific that everybody sees it. Most people are kind of affected by it. The Zionists are never going to give up on them. Just let them go ahead and do their thing. Everybody else, somewhat normal human beings, are horrified at what Biden is doing in Israel now. They're horrified. They're learning about what's been happening in the Congo and that Israel is implicated in that too. And they're horrified about what's happening in the Congo. They don't quite understand what's happening in Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali, those crazy uppity Negroes, but they're scared about that too. I mean, because what it looks like to most people, I believe, it is the result of the indoctrination that we've all gotten since elementary school about this system. America is the best. America is uniquely blessed by God. That's not in the book. I'm trying to tell you, but people believe that. I don't know why they do, because it's not in there. America is the policeman of the world, and America is the shining light of democracy on the hill that the whole world aspires. None of that is true, but we believe it, so that when these other situations in the world are happening and we hear the US media narrative, oh, this is happening because the fundamentalist Islamic jihadists, because it's the Muslims, it's just the Muslims now. The fundamentalist Islamic jihadists are trying to destroy America along with the Chinese and the Russians, and they're trying to rope the stupid Africans in that too. And I'm looking at this, realizing that people who adhere to American exceptionalism are terrified right now, because they think that the communism is going to win. We're hoping that it does, but they think that it's a horde of Palestinian and Chinese and Russian and Yemeni communists storming the beaches of Sacramento or wherever it is, where the beach is in California. And none of that is happening. There is no threat to this country. No, there are not other countries sitting around plotting how to take the US down today. I'm not saying that nobody's doing it at all. I'm just saying nobody's plotting an invasion, because people are poor, right? People are hungry. People have no power. They have no water. They have no food. and the leaders in this country are worried about somebody cooking up an invasion. Government leaders are trying to feed their people to keep them from revolting against them because of what the U.S. has been doing, right? So there's all of this is being uncovered now. And I think people really are, people who don't know any better and don't understand imperialism and capitalism are truly terrified because they do believe that these things are the example of the rest of the world turning on the U.S., right? But I think the rest of us who don't care about what happens to the U.S. basically, because we know that this is all, most of this is all from the U.S. and it's meddling in other countries' business. But most of us we're just trying to survive. So we take this position, we take the imperialist position because we're broke and hungry too. We're homeless and hungry too. And our position is this country owes us so much because we built this country, which, I hate that, but talk about that later. But then, they have to take care of us first. This is what I hear a lot of Black folks that I live around, that I know, that I'm cool with, that I'm friends with. This country has to take care of us before it takes care of anybody else. So I'm not concerned about what is happening in Africa, in Palestine. I don't care what the U.S. is doing anywhere else. They got to take care of us and give us our reparations. So this is kind of the mindset that I think Black people, working class and poor, particularly Black people, have when it comes to presidential elections in this country every 4 years and connecting that to their material conditions. So they never get to the point where their thinking is, I have been struggling all my life, all my natural life. I don't know how many presidents there were since I started working at 14, 15, 16, but it's been a lot of them. And the minimum wage is $2 higher than it was when I started working. I'm 56 now. I can barely afford this mortgage. I'm not getting any kind of relief from anywhere. I haven't had a raise in 5 years. Cost of living is crazy. And all of this has continuously happened to me and everybody around me, no matter which party was in the White House. So why should I vote for either party at all when I get kicked in the ass, regardless of who is in the White House? So I think that's a part of it. There's a segment of the Black voting population that they are fed up just by their own experiences. I'm not going to keep voting for these white people who ain't doing nothing for me, or their Black lackeys who they send on their behalf to tell us that they're not going to do anything for us, and we're supposed to like it because it came from out of Black lips. But I think that there is a portion of the Black voting population has realized the duopoly doesn't exist for them, all on their own, because they've watched their material conditions either deteriorate or not change, not get better, right, over this however long. But I do think there are people who go even farther than that, than just, look, this is what I understand, so this is what I'm going to do. But then there are people, Dr. Tauheed, like Beyonce, bless her, on her white horse, in her her red, white, and blue cowboy outfit, with her white wig, long white wig, flowing gracefully behind her in her white cowboy hat. Did I tell you the horse is white? Did I say that? Yeah, the horse is white. With her cowgirl sash, cowgirl Carter sash on, holding an American flag. That is where I think too many Black folks, the ADOS folks, the Black capitalism folks, the LLC's gonna save us folks, the Boyce Watkinses, and all these people, I can put you on, you can be a millionaire, you don't have to be on the plantation to make your millions, says the guy who was a college professor, and that's how he made his money before he got off the plane. That's another discussion. This is, I think, those are the Black people I'm concerned about, right? Because I know that we have to organize all of our people, but I'm the most concerned with the patriotic Africans. And I don't know what else to call them right now, Dr. Tauheed, because I feel like with everything that is going on, with all of the contradictions and the problems and the political realities that have been exposed, how is anybody, but especially how are Black and brown people, poor people, running around lifting up patriotism, defending imperialism? I trust this country and this government that hasn't done shit for us all this time, continues to steal our labor and all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to trust this government to give us reparations. So I'm going to vote for the representative of one of the parties that hasn't done shit for us in all this time to now all of a sudden turn around and do reparations. Am I reading this wrong, Dr. Tauheed? Am I being hyper cynical in my weakened immune state? My weakened immune state? Is my rehabilitation from this surgery more difficult and deeper than I think because it's apparently affected my brain? What's going on here?
Sister Jacqueline, you have touched on so many points.
It's been awful trying to live and not talk about this.
Yes. Well, we're gonna talk. Not only have you touched on so many points, but they are all connected. All connected. There's not one thing that you said that's not connected to everything else that you said. And so I made a list here. Now, the one thing I wasn't aware of was the Beyonce piece.
Oh, let me find
it. I did see a picture of her. I didn't know it was that pathetic. I really didn't. So I can't deal with that right now. But look, these people, and Beyonce is certainly an example of someone who understands how to sell her product.
Mm-hmm.
And
product.
That's right. Exactly. It's a product. It's a product. I don't know what she really stands for except making money. But if that's, you have to go to the extreme that she has apparently gone to make money. It says something about the process of having to make money, not just the process of living. Because she doesn't have to do that to live. She's got more than she will ever need to spend,
right.
Assuming that she doesn't want to spend all of it. But she has certainly much more than any person needs, and billion times more than what an average person gets. So she's a symbol in that sense of the absurdity of the situation. I got a list here, so let me jump in on one thing, in one point, then maybe go to others. You mentioned the idea of indoctrination, how we have been propagandized and indoctrinated into thinking a certain way about this country and about our position in this country. And in my institutional theory class, I talk to my students about how that indoctrination for us starts very, very early.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about remembering that when I was in elementary school, which was some time ago. And so when I ask my students, is this still going on? They tell me yes. But when I was in elementary school, we used to have assemblies every Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire school would get together, and we would get together in the auditorium, and everyone was there. Your friends were there. It was a great time. We were going to sing songs and enjoy each other's company. And one of the songs that we sing is "This Land Is Your Land." And I can still feel how I felt as little elementary school student, 7, 8 years old, 6, 7, 8 years old, how I felt in those assemblies. there's a wave of nostalgia that comes over you when you think back to those times, because it's time of being with your friends and teachers that you love, and you're having a good time. But I say, look, we sang the first three verses of that song, "This Land Is Your Land." And everybody can remember it. This land is your land, this land is my land. I can go through it now. I don't have to think about it. I've sung it so many times.
Right.
We don't sing the fourth verse.
Why is that?
That song was written by a man named Woody Guthrie during the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote it as a response to a song written by Irving Berlin, "God Bless America."
Really?
And he wrote it and the first three verses is the one we sing because it builds up an idea that this great country belongs to all of us. But the fourth verse goes something like this. We don't sing it, so I don't remember it as well, but I've read it. It says, I was out walking along the highway. While I was walking along the highway, I came to a sign that said "No trespassing." But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. And then he goes on to, in the fifth and sixth verses, to explain the evils of private property. That was that fourth verse. Was saying, a trespassing sign. The other side didn't have any trespassing word on it. Said that side was made for you and me. Private property is something that he didn't recognize, and he was critiquing.
Interesting.
We don't sing that because had we sung that, then we would have asked questions. Wait a minute, Miss Jones. Why is the trespassing a bad thing? Why is no trespassing, or the absence of trespassing? Why is that a good thing? We would have to ask questions about private property. But we don't get to that. We sing the first three verses. And so we are indoctrinated from very early to think of ourselves as labor, owning nothing, whereas those who own something are the American dream. And then there's another example that I tell them about some time ago here in Kansas City, Missouri. One of the superintendents asked me to look at the social studies curriculum. And I did. And the first thing I noticed in the kindergarten was that there was a lesson where the writers of the curriculum, the curriculum specialists, had written this lesson plan, this example lesson plan for students about the economy. And it was the lesson for the day was to teach people where the things we buy come from. And the one of the activities for that lesson plan was to take your children to the supermarket. And I said to the superintendent, and I won't say the name, I said, Superintendent, you know the things we buy don't come from the supermarket. I never thought about that. And I explained how this lesson, right from kindergarten, was intended to make us consumers as opposed to producers. Because the people who are in charge of the production, they take their children to the factory and the farm to learn about where the things we buy come from. We are indoctrinated, and of course, in my college level class in institutional econ, I validate the fact that they've been taught this kind of economics from kindergarten, if not earlier. But all the way through their high school life, and they would continue to learn that if they had gone to a different university with a different economics curriculum. But here we're going to teach. We want you to think about where things really come from, and about how production is important. And you're not only intended to be consumers. You need to learn. We need to learn how to produce things. That the people who know how to produce things are the ones who want us to go to other countries and die for them, as opposed to dealing with the imbalance and the inequity and ownership of property and other kinds of things. So that indoctrination is very strong. And I guess in the intro, the banner, it was I guess the question is asked: Are we kind of captured by the economic issues? I
Yeah.
think you hit on something that is much more visceral than that.
Mm.
Is we are captured by fear.
Oh.
And both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, are using fear to hold us in place in loyalty to them. Whatever we fear. In fact, there's growing evidence in terms of polls that there's a growing number of black and brown voters who are wanting to vote for Donald Trump. And they're fearing immigrants coming across the border and taking their jobs. Now, of course, what they're really fearing is that their bosses will fire them and hire someone else that they can pay less money to.
Yeah. So okay,
Yeah.
right there, because I've been having a hard time with this conversation that I've been with, because I think I just have one of those faces which is why I don't go to the store that much, because every time I'm in the grocery store, I'm just standing there minding my business. I'm trying to reach the thing on the third shelf that I want. And people come up to me all the time. Did you hear blah, blah, blah? And they don't know me. They do not know who I am. And I've asked people what made you come up to me and think I wanted to talk about this? And they're like, you just have a really welcoming looking face and presence. So I'm like, yeah, I can't be walking around with this. I'm just gonna stay home. but when I talk to Black folks who have that attitude, I almost want to get upset with them, because they are helping to oppress another group of oppressed people. They're helping the imperialist, the capitalist system that oppresses us. We're helping them oppress another group of people, which is, but then I kind of thought, like, okay, wait, I don't think they understand that's what's happening. And the reason they don't understand what's happening is because they really are like, these people are going to replace me in my job because it's cheaper for them too. But the thing that I try to get people to see is, it is not the immigrants who are trying to replace you or trying to take your jobs. The immigrants are not here because they want your job. First of all, the reason immigrants are here is because this government constantly and incessantly interferes in, destabilizes, props up the worst leaders in their countries. So their countries are not safe for them to live, to raise a family, to live themselves. So they leave and they come to where they think it's safe because of the same kind of propaganda that the US espouses. And then they get here and then they see what a terrible, exploitative, horrible capitalist place is, with the same policies almost that they left in their countries. So immigrants are not coming here to take Americans' jobs. They're coming here because the US government is destroying their countries, makes it impossible for them to have a job in their own country or anything else for that matter. That's one thing. And then I think the second thing is that we do know that we are on the bottom of this system. And we know that our situation is precarious.
Yes.
And rather than looking at this immigration situation as another way, the system, the status quo, the capitalist politicians of both parties continue to advance policies that keep us on the bottom of the economic ladder, but also exploit another group of people, which we should not be supporting at all. We should not be like, we can't let them in because they're going to take our jobs. Because then so then what are they saying about people who are here? I mean, do you want them to be homeless? It's just very weird. But I think that people who are in this, I'm against immigration because of jobs. I think the other part of it for them is I agree with you. There is this like visceral fear of them losing their decrepit place in this society. instead of thinking, oh man, they're gonna exploit some other people. What do we do to stop that? Because we know what that's like, and it sucks, and we don't want it to be done to us anymore. So what can we do to make sure they don't do it to anybody? That everybody who wants a job gets a decent wage and decent benefits. How do we get that?
Right.
So I think that's why I think it's been hard for me to really like condemn Black folks who have this anti-immigrant perspective. Because I think for most regular folks, they're really not seeing who the real culprit is, because that's how the whole thing is designed. They're not seeing that it's the US government and the very politicians who are telling us you have to vote for one of us. You know, and the other guy, and I'm the lesser evil compared to the other guy.
In the US government, yeah, and the US government is just doing the bidding of their bosses, right? And so the US government, you know, if you want to find the cause of this, it's not the US government is just a tool. Tools aren't causes of things.
Okay.
The man behind the curtain pulling the strings, right? The billionaires, the multimillionaires who are directing policy. You know, they're wanting to hire lower wage worker and replace their, you know, uppity American higher wage workers who barely making it with lower wage workers. One of the statistics that is quite astounding is that since the pandemic, we've had, if I remember the numbers, you know, 7 million new jobs created. Those new jobs, the net new jobs, the net new jobs offsets jobs to, quote, foreign workers as opposed to jobs to native workers, the persons who are here. And we find that the net increase in jobs created has been because there's been a decrease in jobs to native workers, new jobs, and an increase in jobs to foreign workers. Now, those foreign workers are not just low-wage workers working in agriculture and so forth. This phenomena is also part of this phenomena is also the H-1B visa workers,
right?
Highly skilled workers. And if you look at that, and you get an idea that it is those people, those foreign workers, who are coming in and taking your jobs, and ignore the fact that they are being hired by people who hire them. I mean, you have to go through quite a process to get an H-1B visa.
Yeah, and they're not cheap either, are they?
That's right. And I noticed this some time ago when I was in software development, that American programmers were being replaced by Indian programmers. And I would say to my, you know, at the time I wasn't an economist, so I didn't have econo speak. But it says, look, you know, Indian programmers are just as skilled as American programmers. They've learned the programming in the same schools, but they are less expensive than American programmers. So you're, at the time, American programmer, you're losing your job for your $60,000 a year programming job. And these companies are replacing you with Indian programmers who are just as skilled, who are willing to work for a lot less. What's the Indian programmer supposed to do? They need work. They are as skilled. They come to the country. They learn how to do that job, but then they're being hired by someone who is wanting to pay for the least for a programmer, and that's the person that needs to be confronted. not Indian programmer who wants to come to this program. And there's another another level of this phenomena that's occurring now, where you have thousands, tens of thousands of technology workers in these companies who are being laid off, and they're being replaced by artificial intelligence systems. So artificial intelligence system intelligent enough to want your job? Is that what's happening? They want your job, so you get no. It's the owner of the company who's replacing you with a software with program, because they want additional profits, and they could care less what that does to you or your family or the country as a whole. They could care less. It's all about.
And the thing about the fact that immigrants are paid less for any job, I don't care what job it is, they're paid less for any job that they accept in this country. And it's not just that they're only paid a lower salary. Think about that. And I had to really think about this. Think about this, y'all. It's not just a lower salary for one worker. We're talking about a bunch of workers who are more likely to be coerced into working longer hours than they're supposed to, into working through their breaks, into being always on call, being taking work home in the evenings and on the weekends, and not because they want to, but because they're told to by that, because they understand that not only can they pay these people less money, they can also abuse them in ways that they cannot abuse American workers, because most American workers, well, I can't even say that's true now, because the way people are still loyal to companies, I don't understand. People are like, oh, I worked for Pepco for 30 years. Why? I mean, do you still have a pension? Pepco, they don't have a pension. What you? Oh, and there was actually a story the other day about an older man. He worked for the post office. He had 478 unused sick days and like 1,300 unused vacation days. And this guy never missed a day of work, never took a day off, nothing, ever, for anything, never. He's like, I'm not close to retiring. No, you need to be forced to to retire. You need to take the money that the company spent, that you actually spent,
that's right,
on your benefits. This, because I mean, and I use this guy as an example of how American workers think they can stave the other way. They think they can stave off the immigrant worker influx. If it's not, don't let them come in, no immigrants, close the border because they may take our jobs, then it's the other end of the spectrum. Well, I can protect my job by impressing my boss, like by being, because this is what I grew up in the workforce, by being indispensable. That's what they tell you. That is what they. If you really want to do a good job, if you really want to impress the CEO, then you have to make if you want to show that you are promotion material, Jacquie, you have to make yourself indispensable. And I was smart enough that one time to ask what that meant. And I remember saying it was my supervisor too. And I was saying, after she ran down the list of all the things that I, don't wait to be asked to do something, volunteer, take on more assignments, work with other people, and, go the extra mile for your manager, get their coffee, get their dry cleaning. I'm sitting there like, but y'all ain't paying me to be nobody's maid though. So I'm not doing that. And this woman, she was a Black woman. She was the head of HR. This woman was like, then you really have to change your attitude, Jacquie. You have an attitude problem, and you don't work well with others, because you don't pay me to do that either. I mean, you pay me to be a technical writer, to write sections for proposals, to write press releases, to correct y'all's terrible grammar. That's what you pay me to do. I'm not doing anything else.
Right.
I will do that extremely well, but I'm not taking work home. I'm not working on the weekends. I am not on call after 5 o'clock on any day ever. And she was like, I should fire you. Go ahead, because I'm telling you, you will get this work, but all this other stuff, trying to make myself, I'm not indispensable. Other people can do this work, sure. I mean, what else do you want? I mean, she just really didn't know what to do. And she was like, I really should fire you. And I'm just sitting there telling her, okay. And she really did not understand why I didn't care. And then she was like, well, okay, well, I'm not going to fire you because everybody loves your work. And I'm like, exactly.
Apparently you are already indispensable. You just do what you were supposed to do.
Right. And I just kind of sat there and looked at her and I said, so wait, none of this is about anybody complaining about my work. People have, when they gave you input for this review, so the comments were positive. Oh, very positive. Everybody loves your work. So why are you telling me that I have to do all this extra stuff? Well, because, Jacquie, we really want to see you climb the corporate ladder. I am not interested in your corporate ladder. And that really freaked her out. She's like, but you can be a proposal manager. I don't want to manage proposals. That's terrible. That's a terrible job. Nobody should want to manage proposals. No, this is incredibly stressful. Way more stressful than any job should be that doesn't involve a weapon. That's just, and so, we have a corporate culture that doesn't want to understand that workers have rights and have lives and should be encouraged and supported in having lives and activities outside of work. Because it's those things, the things that you do to have fun and that you enjoy outside of work with your family, those things develop you as a person.
Right.
This work business pays the mortgage. And that's all it is.
Yeah, and then there's this new phenomenon called the soft promotion, where you get a change in your title, but you don't get any more money. I wonder if you can get soft promoted all the way up to the CEO of the corporation. When you're being paid assistant manager salary. Can you do, how does that work? But
it doesn't exist at the corporate level.
No. But yeah, and so so there's this fear, and it goes into the discussion you had we're going to have on voting, right? In terms of voting for the lesser of the two evils. In other words, we should vote for Biden because we are afraid of Trump. And I've had to confront this with a number of people in the community, and it becomes a depressing conversation that regardless of how we think Biden might be, and people who are going to vote for Biden are not championing what Biden has done. They're disgusted with what he's done. We can't have Trump win, and it just occurred to me that Black folks in this country have lived through worse than Trump. And in fact, those persons who have laid down their lives for our right to vote lived through times when things were much worse than a President Trump could ever make it. And so I asked the question that occurs to me: when did we become so afraid of what other folks were going to do to us that we would throw away what our ancestors fought and died for? They didn't fight for us to just roll over and vote for whoever was going to be there. They voted, they gave their lives for a vote that would liberate us. And I think they would be terribly upset that we have become so afraid for what, quote, people might do to us, that we would vote for someone who is really doing us no good. You know, and so then again, it's fear. And there's an idea among folks in the reparations movement, and I'm part of that in terms of work here in Kansas City, but also elsewhere, who are wanting to say to Joe Biden, you know, we need you to start the commission under HR 40 by executive order in order to earn our vote. The question is, well, what if he doesn't do that? What are you going to do? Are you not going to vote for him? I mean, if he hasn't earned our vote, are we going to vote for him anyway?
Right. So
earning our vote, it means nothing if you don't have a plan that if you don't do this, we're not going to vote for you and mean it. Like the uncommitted voters all over the country who are voted, not only voted uncommitted, but they didn't vote uncommitted because if Biden calls a ceasefire, tells Netanyahu to call a ceasefire in Palestine and in Gaza, and also stop sending him weapons, then we'll vote for you, Joe Biden. That's not what they're saying. They're saying we're not going to vote for you. You have lost our vote. Period.
There is nothing you can do to earn our vote because you have lost it with your actions.
Yes, exactly. And so when do we get a point where we say, okay, if Trump is president, bring it on. We've been through this before. We're going to organize and be ready for Trump. In fact, we probably need to organize to be ready for Trump just because we need to organize. We need maybe the fear will cause us to be serious about organizing for our own community's benefit instead of the benefit of the Democratic Party. We organize every now and then, vote when time comes to vote, and then after the vote, we go to sleep. We do nothing. And when politicians do nothing that they campaigned on to get our vote, we don't hold them accountable. That's not what my ancestors died for.
No, my folks were all about that follow through and then follow up. You know, this whole thing about, all right, if you're going to vote for the man because you're terrified of Trump, fine, vote for him because you're terrified of Trump. I am opposed to people telling other people, just like I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. Don't tell people who have made up their mind that is, you know, what you just said is what they're going to do. Like, look, this will come to you. This is how you can earn our vote. And then when that isn't done, if that is rejected, then okay, you don't want to earn our vote? We're not giving you our vote then get up, walk away from the table, and then go do the thing that you said you would do. If he didn't, you know, we have to do this. And, you know, I was talking to somebody about the uncommitted movement in Michigan, and they were saying, you know, we should go help those comrades. We're like, oh no, they don't need our help. We need to follow their example. That's what we should do, because we're always people are always talking about the weirdest things in the strangest way, that, you know, politics, electoral politics, what we can and should do in electoral politics, from buying a politician to you know, creating a super PAC ourselves. And it's like, look, I don't know how many times we can tell y'all that we don't have that kind of money. we don't have APAC money to buy a politician. We do not. So short of that, can we think of something realistic that we can do that actually would cause some damage for these crappy politicians? And then
we have a vote.
Okay. I mean, and this one isn't even hard. Like this one, of all of the things that organizers, you know, sit around all the time and plan, we're going to do this, we're going to do. I mean, this is easy. This isn't even as complicated as organizing a teach-in to be put on. It honestly is not. Organizing a teach-in takes 87 damn steps. You know, and you need 10, 15 people to do everything, make sure everything is, and then you got to have somebody overseeing that. All this is, okay, let's meet with Joe Biden. And the first thing they did in the uncommitted struggle, which well, I love this. Apparently, I guess they met with him earlier and told him, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
This is what we're going to do. And now this thing is kicking off in Palestine, and it looks like you are giving Israel weapons and money still. Why? That's got to stop. If you don't declare that there needs to be a ceasefire, we're not voting for you. Not voting. And that's what they did. That's so when the next time when Biden said, no, I'm not going to do that after that first meeting, they made up their mind then. Nope. So the next time Biden tries to come to Detroit, and I think it was Dearborn to meet with the Arabs in Michigan who were part of the uncommitted campaign. So Biden comes thinking that he's going to sweet talk these people, voting him, and they refuse to receive him for the meeting.
And quite frankly, in this atmosphere, the Muslims who are in Dearborn, Michigan, somewhere around 50% of the population who have decided they're not going to vote for Biden, have probably the most to fear immediately from a Trump presidency. Yes. They are not afraid of Trump.
They're
not afraid. And so, fear will make you do irrational things. And we're caught up in in something more visceral than just the economics. Because, poor people aren't afraid because they're poor. And they can be heroic even though they are poor.
Absolutely.
Money doesn't make you a coward or a hero. What do you commit yourself to? Because our folks, when they were fighting and dying for the vote before 65, certainly we were not at top of the economic scale. We had a lot to lose economically. We had much to lose economically when we decided in the Montgomery bus boycott not to ride the buses. We could have lost our jobs, but we organized and decided that we were going to support each other as a community so we could get to our work. And the work wasn't like it was, we were high paid jobs. We were just making it. But we were not going to support the bus company. And we decided and we organized and we used our economic power in that sense, and our political power to bring them to heel to an accommodation that we agreed upon. And so the Muslim community up there is doing what we used to know how to do. And we need to get back to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Montgomery bus boycott, because people love to use that whenever they talk about, well, we should just boycott. And I always remind people that the Montgomery bus boycott was organized with the community, the members of the faith community in Montgomery, people from all walks of life, even some white people, even a few white people. They organized rides for people to and from work, like you said, to get to wherever they. So they organized people with personal cars. They organized taxi drivers who would give up some of their fares to transport people to where they needed to go. There was all this organization, restaurants or just people who cook, providing food for people who couldn't get to the grocery store, that kind of thing. This couldn't have just like come together with a bunch of people just kind of hanging out in one space, maybe there for the same reason. No, these things had to be organized. They had to be scheduled and planned and worked out. And the people who were doing them had to participate in the organization. So, they knew, so they could present to people what they had to offer and what they could do. And so that was, and the Montgomery bus boycott lasted more than a year. It lasted longer than a year, more than 365 days. So when people throw around the word, why don't we just boycott? Like people were saying this at, what was it? Wells Fargo when they were ripping off folks, a lot of Black folks. Well, why don't we just boycott? Well, Wells Fargo. That's what they did in the Montgomery boycott, Montgomery bus boycott. And then I started telling people what the boycott was, what it entailed, and how people sacrificed in order to keep the boycott going and to support the people. And I always ask people, after I go through my spiel, what are you willing to do?
Are we ready to do that?
For people, and to make sure everybody has banking services while we're boycotting Wells Fargo? Because let me tell you something. If you boycott Wells Fargo, you might as well boycott every bank.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to move to the credit unions. That would be great if we did that. But people aren't even willing to sit down and think through what a boycott entails, what is required of the people, of anything. If you're going to boycott a cleaning product, okay, what are you going to do for the people to replace that, who rely on it all the time? People seem to want things that we have done in the past without wanting to do the groundwork, the organizing, the communication that got our ancestors those wins. They didn't win these things by just standing there and being fantastic. They were,
or by our oratory. We've done this before. We have pleaded for justice and for equality. We've pleaded to politicians to do right by us, and it didn't work. So we went into action, and we're back to pleading now. Okay, if the pleading is not going to work, then the action is the only thing that's going to work. And when you say to someone, unless you do this, we won't vote for you, and then they don't do it, and we vote for them anyway, then
right, they're like,
we got you. And what makes it more of a weapon is if they can turn our fear against us, our indoctrination. We're going to be afraid. We know that Trump has a different more direct agenda for us than a Biden does. But it's that being boiled slowly like the frog in a pot. You end up cooked either way, either slowly or quickly. You end up being cooked. So you got to decide you're going to get out the pot.
Yeah, I mean, and of all the things, I just really can't wrap my mind around this presidential election, Dr. Tauheed, because it's a ridiculous farce in the context of the world being on fire, right? Multipolarity breaking out over here. There's a genocide here. There's another genocide here. And then, the president that is in office now has obvious cognitive issues. The last president, he's got obvious cognitive issues too, but people are just afraid to admit it because they're afraid the MAGAites will come and chase him down and beat them up in the street, which they probably will. But it's I don't know, Dr.
There's a story about the MAGAites that I think is relevant. You remember back at the Charlottesville tiki torch ralliers, right? There's a story that came on the news. I saw it one time. It was a young white man who was talking about how the tiki torchers had surrounded a church, and Cornel West was in the church with some ministers, right? So he tells it from that side as well. And they surrounded the church, and the people were afraid in the church, and they didn't come out and so forth. And so what he reported was that the tiki torchers said, "Well, we're going to walk down to the Black community," and they started walking down to the Black community. And on the way, they changed their mind.
Yeah, they did.
They realized that no, we don't want to go down there.
No, you don't.
Because the things that we've been saying about them, maybe it's true that everybody's got a gun, and we better turn around.
Yeah.
And so the idea that we should be afraid. Yeah, they have guns, and they might beat you, try to beat people in the street. But that's what you organize for.
That's why you organize. So
That's
you
right.
ain't never caught alone.
That's right. And so nobody thinks about doing that crazy stuff because they know that there are consequences for it. But I think one way or another we are getting into a point in which we're going to be forced to organize in those ways. You mentioned in the international level, the rest of the world is realizing what America is to them,
Yeah.
and what it has been. There's not only the story of the French being kicked out of the Niger and Burkina Faso and so forth, but the U.S. military has been told to leave Niger, and that's only going to cause an escalade of
Mhm.
that type of movement where they're now the U.S. government is not France.
True. True.
They will try to stay. But what these countries are doing, I mean, we have a new Cold War, obviously, and what these countries are doing are inviting the Russians in
Mhm.
as well. And it was one thing when you have a proxy war in Africa between two countries, to two regimes where the Soviets and the Americans are not there. It's
Mhm.
another thing if you have Soviet mercenaries, if you will, and American troops in a country, and the government has said you need to leave.
Mhm.
And then are you willing to go to war? Is the U.S. willing to go to war with Russia in these countries? I don't think they are,
No, they're not. No.
and nobody would want that.
Mm-mm.
But these, so the rest of the world is realizing that the U.S. not only is from its association with the genocide in Gaza, and Joe Biden's, I suppose it is possibly believable that a Joe Biden with his cognitive difficulty could not convince Netanyahu to stop what he's doing, because maybe Joe Biden doesn't really understand what's going on. You can make that argument. Well, he doesn't really understand, so he doesn't grasp it. So, but it really is not conceivable that the U.S. can't stop Israel from doing what they're doing,
Right.
and the rest of the world knows this, and
Mhm.
is deciding that I don't want to be on the side of genocide Joe. I
Right.
want to be on his side, or his government. If this is his government, then we need some alternatives, and it's the majority of the world that is
Mhm.
realizing that this polarity is putting them on that the U.S. is on the wrong side of history here, and they want to be
Yeah.
with the U.S. in that. This is the U.S. Shooting itself in the foot. I think is these are death throes of an empire,
Mhm.
and in that sense, the death throes, the entity that's dying lashes out and lashes out, and kicks and screams, but nobody pays any attention because they know it'll be over soon. You know.
Mm.
And the question in that context is, what are Black folks going to do? What are we
Right.
going to do?
Mhm.
Which side are we going to stand with the genocide? Or are we going to, apparently we have some courageous folks in Congress
Well,
who are
one or two.
one or two, yeah, and
And that's pretty
black
much it.
women who are pulling some others in
Mhm.
to stand up against this, and
Mm.
they are, well, in some sense, putting their political careers on the line, but apparently political careers are not, don't measure up to human lives to them. So they're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who is that other than Rashida Tlaib?
Talib and Omar and AOC and pretty much the entire progressive caucus voted against this new $1.2 trillion budget, which withdrew humanitarian aid from organizations giving aid in Gaza. They voted against that. Now they were in the majority. It voted. It passed, obviously, and was going to pass. But But of course, AIPAC is all of the candidates that AIPAC is raising $100 million to go against. Those are the ones who are standing up for against genocide for Palestinians. So it certainly was Rashida Tlaib, but it was also other members of the squad who are standing up. And I'm surprised by, and I don't say this in disparaging, I'm surprised by Jamal Bowman, but he stood up as well. So
yeah, I'll disparage him.
he's on the right side of this. So
yeah, he's finally got on the right side of this. AOC finally said something. Tlaib, I think she has been outspoken from the beginning. I think,
right. And Bush and Cori and Bush as well.
Oh yeah, and Cori Bush. But that's these are, especially AOC. I just have a she just anyway. It's not. I'll talk about her on another show. So I, on the one hand, Dr. Tauheed, I feel like when I see the protests in other countries, and then I see the protests here, and it's not that the protests here are not monumental. It's not like they're not record breaking. They certainly are, but I still feel like there is a serious disconnect. I mean, you can almost see it happen in real time. You don't even have to be like a journalist or an online personality or anything. All you have to do is have a conversation with someone about what's going on in Palestine, and the people say that the most ridiculous things, like people still saying that what's going on in Israel is complicated. I just really want to punch these people in the face, because it's not. It's never been because Israel rather has never been complicated about what they were doing and what they wanted. They have never made this. It was never like an undercover kind. Okay, let's not tell people we're stealing the land from. No, they went in with the UN giving them 55% of Palestine. Right. So there is this whole history of just awful, illegal, inhumane, wrong practices that went into the establishment of Israel. And to hear people continue to act as if that's not true when okay, I guess in 1948, 1950, this information was probably kind of hard to come by for regular folks. It's 2024. It's not now. This information is literally public knowledge. It's all over the place. You can pull it up on the internet. You can find out everything you want to know about what Israel has done to Palestine since 1948 with the help of the United States. And I just feel like there are too many people still in this country who don't want to know, who don't want to know what the U.S. is doing. Yeah. And who choose rather, because I don't believe it's that they don't know, they do not want to know. And I'll tell you why. So yesterday I did an interview on for CGTN on their show, The Heat. And imagine my surprise, Dr. Tauheed, when I go into the platform, they use Skype. I go into Skype and I see Eleanor Clift as one of the panelists. Now, I when I was in high school, I was a political junkie. My mama did not understand what was wrong with me. I watched when C-SPAN was launched. That was the best thing in the world for me. I loved C-SPAN. I loved Court TV with the live hearings and so all of this information. I'm just sitting there like watching these conversations about these issues being had, like, oh man, I didn't know that's what that was. So I learned all this information about Israel and Gaza, and I'm watching news, and I, watched the McLaughlin group, because that's where what's her face, Eleanor Clift was on the McLaughlin group. I watched the McLaughlin group religiously for years, my high school years, Meet the Press, all of these people before I became an anti-imperialist. And then it's like, oh, well, they're all lying. So, whatever. But still, Eleanor Clift was one of my journalist heroines, right? So I'm like, oh my God, this Eleanor Clift. So we're doing the interview. And these people are talking about the election, right? And they're talking about Trump and Biden. And so nobody's saying anything about this genocide. Nobody.
Right.
Nobody's saying anything about Biden funding and arming the Israeli government to slaughter all of the Palestinians to take their land.
All of it.
That's what's happening. And I was really upset because I was just like, I cannot believe that upwards of 40,000 people, 13,000 children have been slaughtered by Israel. And y'all are sitting here talking about, America believes Trump, America believes Biden, but neither of you are talking about how both of these people helped create this situation. They enabled it and they helped create it. So it doesn't matter to the Palestinians which one of them we vote for, because both of them are going to continue to do the same things to the Palestinians. And that should make us angry, because if this government will do this to the Palestinians, who have the law and morality and everything and history on their side, what do you think they're going to do to us?
Right.
Why do you think we should sit here and continue to entertain this idea about we got to vote for these two shitty people who haven't done anything for us and who are now doing worse? One of them is doing worse to the Palestinians. How are you going to bully us into voting for one of them?
Yeah, I remember as a young man not being anywhere near as politically oriented. I didn't have any, the knowledge wasn't there. But I remember in the Encyclopedia Britannica, I would go through and avidly read encyclopedias. And I remember looking at South Africa, and it was on a list of democratic countries in the world. And I'm looking at, and without very much knowledge, I just had a sense that, that there was something wrong for South Africa to be on that list of democracies.
Apartheid South Africa.
Apartheid, oh yeah, oh absolutely. Apartheid South Africa was on the list of democratic countries. And then, to my surprise, I find out that one of the great supporters of South Africa, which was a supporter of the Nazi regime of Hitler, was the state of Israel. And I'm trying to figure out, how does this work? That the South African supporters of the Nazis are now allies with the Israel, which were the victims of the Nazi. I'm saying, how is this working? And so when you say it's complex, that's not complex. We know that Hitler was evil, which makes South Africa evil, which makes Israel support of South Africa evil. There's no complexity there. There's no nuance. It's evil all around. But and so when you get into now the current support for the Nazis in Ukraine, and then you get into the genocide of the Palestinians by the Israeli IDF, and you get the stories about innocent people being lured into to a food drop and being mowed down. This is evil. Now, when did evil become complicated? Evil is not complex. There's no complexity here. At least for Black folks, it should be very simple. It's good and evil. We learn that in church, right? There's good and there's evil. And the things that there might be some nuance there in the middle, but killing innocent people is not nuanced.
No.
Killing babies is not. There's no complexity here. If you kill babies wantonly or kill babies intentionally, you are evil.
Yeah.
This is pure evil. There's nothing complex here.
Yeah, that was the argument from the Israelis about what Hamas allegedly did to Israeli babies, and of course we found out that's a lie.
Exactly.
But Eleanor Clift believes that the situation is complex. I think I exasperated her because I was like, any journalist who is not reporting on what this government is doing in Palestine right now is not worth the paper their degree is written on. It's just, I don't understand how anybody in politics and journalism are not talking about this right now. It makes no sense. Everybody who has a platform should be on it and should be demanding that the US government stop sending money and arms to Israel and demand an end to the occupation. But not her. She said, well, it's a very complicated situation in Israel. She was pissed too when she said it. She's like, it's a very complicated situation in Israel. And I was like, you know what? No, it's not, Eleanor. And it just struck me in that moment that someone with the reputation and the just her reputation and her experience, this is going on in your mind. Jesus, we're doomed.
Trump brings an interesting phenomenon even into this, because Trump, of course, got elected because he was willing to say the quiet things out loud, and then we get Jared Kushner saying the quiet things out loud. It really is about Gaza beachfront property.
Yep.
That's what it's about. It's about committing genocide to clear the land so that real estate developers can turn the beach on the Mediterranean that is Gaza into hotel property. It's really that simple. It's about profit and about the money and about billionaires. It really is that simple.
And once we understand that about the genocide in Palestine, doesn't that put in context every other conflict in the world? I don't care where it is.
Yeah.
Every other conflict in the when you peel back the layers, and there are never that many layers. The imperialists are lazy, y'all. They're not gonna create a whole bunch of level of layers so you can't, but they don't want to explain anything. So they're just gonna make it the most ridiculous thing possible and just tell you what they're doing right there. And because we're not gonna organize to go against them. They know this. Because in this country they crushed the labor movement once, and they figure they can do it again. I'm not so sure they can pull that off this time. If we all organize the labor movement, if we organize the environmental movement, the women's rights movement, children's rights, the commons folks, the people who want to turn common land back into common land for people, anti-imperialists, the radicals, revolutionaries, pan-Africanists. If we all get together and organize domestically and connect with the people around the world who are organizing against imperialism, we will win. We will win. But we scared. We are scared, Dr. Tauheed. We're scared of the government because we've seen the FBI and what they did to the African People's Socialist Party. Look at what happens when you say negative things about the government. People don't know anything about the case, but they know that it's a case of the government punishing Black people for being uppity, right? So most people are looking at the way the government is oppressing, repressing free speech among protesters, and oppressing individual people who are exercising their supposed First Amendment rights. And people are like, I don't want to be a target of the government. And that is the frustrating part, I think, of organizing, realizing that what you're dealing with a lot of our people, it's not intransigence, it's not like really hatred of another group of people. It's what you said, Dr. Tauheed, it's fear. And I don't think I know how to deal with how to help people move through their fear. I mean, I understand that I did it, and I still do, because it's not like I want to be targeted by the government, but if what I do does, if they notice me because of what I do and they don't like what I'm saying, that's a badge of honesty. That's like, okay, fine. But I just really feel like the people in power, they know our history better than we do. They know that they spent a lot of time crushing the labor movement in this country. The business plot of, I can't remember the year now, but it was a business plot where basically the capitalists in this country tried to coup President Roosevelt.
This is Smedley Butler.
Yes.
One of the racket reveals this. Yeah, this was the plot by the DuPonts.
Yes.
And the Fords and other billionaires to overthrow the Roosevelt government. And it was exposed by Smedley Butler. I forget the name of the commission that he testified for, the Congressional Commission. Yeah, but those folks have not gone away. A considerable part of that attempted coup was a group, an investment group called the Brown Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
The Brown Brothers are the ancestors of the Bush family. The what is his name? Prescott Bush is Bush, Herbert Walker. Yeah, the Walker families and the Browns were together in I believe in a company that was part of the conspiracy to overthrow the government. These folks, they've got money, so they don't give up. They go from one generation to the next generation in terms of wanting to maintain their power. But the rest, the majority of the world is also moving in a direction to throw off that power. I am particularly encouraged by young people who maybe don't have enough experience to be afraid.
Yeah, they are.
And so the Congress is passing a bill to outlaw TikTok.
Yeah,
because the young people are organizing on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
They figure that, well, if they get control of TikTok, they can get control of the organizing of the young people. Young people they'll organize around TikTok. There'll be something else that they'll use. They're very innovative, and so they're not going to be able to stop this by use of technology. The young people, they know more about this technology than the older folks.
But they do.
That's fear on the other side, the fear of the organizing and the use of technology to do that. And it's causing, this is another death throw situation where, the young are organizing on TikTok. Let's get rid of TikTok. Well, okay. They'll figure out another way to organize. They're not going to go away.
And should that fact that young people are fearless, they're innovative, they're creative, they're energetic,
and it's existential for them.
And then there's that, right? Yeah, just like we got to live 56, or I don't know how your age, and I'm not going to ask, so you don't have to tell, but
a bit older.
Right. We got to live to our senior years, These kids are facing a future where they're not sure if they're going to reach middle age.
Right.
How do people? I am honestly, sometimes I'm like washing the dishes and I'm sitting there thinking like, how are these kids okay? I don't understand how they're okay, because if I were facing, and in a way I am, but I'm always hoping I can activate, the Holy Express plan and be like, okay, I'm ready, Lord. And he's like, all right, let's go. It probably will not happen that way, but I mean, if I am 20 and climate change is here and we already see what it's doing.
Right.
And the economic situation, I'm 20 years old, I'm maybe 24, just graduated from college. I've got this 5, 6-figure debt
Right.
from college. The job I got out of college with my fancy degree is not paying me the money that I thought I was going to make with this degree. So now I've got to get another job to pay for my rent. And it should probably be a job in the food industry because, you know, I can't afford groceries with the salary I get off of this degree.
Yeah. And while you were in college the last 5 years racking up that 6-figure debt, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have added another $10 billion. No, that's probably not enough. Another $500 billion to their wealth, you know. And there's something wrong there, and they know it, and they're not being motivated by fear, at least not fear of who to vote for. You know, there's something that is even more frightening, and that's existence, that's life itself. And us older folks, we may be less urgent in that because we figure, okay, by the time the climate collapses, we'll be gone anyway. So
I'll be in a nursing home anyway.
but they were looking forward to a better life, and so they sang those songs too. This land is your land, and all this, God bless America. They sang those songs too, and what's hitting them is the dissonance between what they sung in those assemblies and the way the world really is. And information age has laid it bare. You know, I almost never watch anything on mainstream media. I get all of my news from alternative media, and they do too. Because alternative media is on the media that they use. Not just TikTok, but there's lots of other.
Yeah.
And as the machine, the deep state tries to censorize them back into acquiescence, they're not going there. And so helping young people to get a better idea of how the world works is certainly what motivates me as a teacher. And I have hope on that. But then I'm pessimistic that before they get to do what they'll do, the world will come to an end. You know,
that's because we are older, and we.
and then you have these idiots.
It's a dangerous thing.
Then you have these idiots in Ukraine, like the Macron, who are going around threatening to send French troops into Ukraine to start the process of nuclear war. I hope they understand. I think everyone understands that when Vladimir Putin says, if you send French troops into Ukraine, we're going to kill them. I hope they have no doubt about that. And of course he's just gone through an election. And what's interesting, what I find kind of one of the interesting comments is people are still connecting Putin with communism. You know, he's a communist, and so because there was a member of the Communist Party who ran against Putin.
Yes,
he lost. So the communists lost. Putin is not a communist. But that against him as if he's an old Soviet style leader. He's not that. Russia is not the Soviet Union. And they're able to do something that the old Soviet Union couldn't do. The old Soviet Union could build military weapons and in vast amounts and so forth. They could do that. They didn't learn how to feed their people. Well, Russia knows how to feed people and build weapons. Right. And so what are you going to do? You sanctioning them is just made them stronger.
I mean, I didn't understand why the government put more sanctions on. I mean, I know why they did it, but it's like the first round of sanctions did not work. Russia out here living their best life. When everybody knows we used to work for Sputnik, and we got a raise. Even we got a raise because a month before it was like, oh, we're having money problems. I don't know. I think these sanctions are really bad. And the next month was like, okay, well, hey, everybody's getting a raise. We're like, oh, thank you for the sanctions. But the sanctions are not doing.
Projected economic growth in Russia is over 4%.
What's the U.S.
is 2%. So in good times it's 3%. And China's economic growth over the last 3 decades has been 8%. The sanctions, the economic growth before the sanctions in Russia were about 2%. Now they're 4%. So it's, and the shelves are full, and people are working overtime and getting paid well, and like I said, all of that. These last sanctions of 500 items. It's like, okay, you just reserved those 500 items to sanction until the other sanctions didn't work. So it's really, these 500 are really going to work.
These are going to do it.
Yeah. No, it's just political. It's propaganda. It's Biden administration pretending to do something, but it really is death throes. It is talking loud and saying nothing, as the expression goes, and it's an indication that the majority of the world is going in a different direction. And empires come and go, and this one is going. It's on its now.
That's good news. That's always good news that this empire is on its way out. But it is not going to be good news when it happens if we are not organized and prepared for what comes.
Yes.
After this empire does fall. That's why
as it's falling, right? Because
Right. Yeah, we can't wait until like the day of the collapse. And like, all right, let's think about what we gonna have when. No, because the right wing, they are organized. Yeah. They are organized, and they absolutely will begin to implement what they want. As a matter of fact, there is and I just learned about them. Other than the family, the organization, the family, the Christians.
Right,
the evangelical Christians who basically run Washington. They're the people who started that ridiculous prayer breakfast, and that's nothing but a political litmus test, that the family puts on for the political administration in White House. Right. If they are sufficiently, everyone, if they are sufficiently approved by the family, everyone, since every president since I think Jimmy Carter wasn't the first prayer breakfast under Carter.
I think it may have been earlier though, but at least since Carter.
Every president since, and these people, they don't like you, they don't like me, they don't like immigrants, they don't like people who are not Christians, they don't like gay folks, they don't like they don't like trans people, they are evangelical white Christian men who want their interpretation of the Bible to be the law of the land. And I think their organization is called, what do they call themselves? Now I can't remember what they call themselves, but they say that they are planning for a national divorce of white evangelicals from the Okay. So this is the plan. So I think this is a part of the Heritage Foundations, or maybe this is a new organization, I don't know, of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. And I'm glad that Gloria brought up that document that was the plan for the entire region, Haiti and Cuba and the whole region. That so it's like the fear of the Republicans is really weird, because this Plan 25 is not new. It's actually not new. It's a rehash of an old Republican plan with the things that they didn't accomplish, right? But then being afraid of the Republicans because of Plan 2025 or Project 2025, whatever it is, like, do you think that's the scariest thing this government has come up with? I mean, to pass some right-wing, anti-woman, anti-Black, anti-immigrant law. Aren't they doing that already? What are you afraid of? What is there that we are so afraid of that we're like, oh, we can't let Donald Trump back in when
Yeah, it's as if, you know, when these things, if Donald Trump goes away, that goes away too. No, well, no, it just you know, it's able to show its head more because of Trump being there. But I prefer to see them than for them to be behind me, doing things that I can't see. I want them in front of me. You know, you want your enemy in front of you doing the things. That is, if you intend to do anything about it. Now,
Right.
if you're trying to run away from it, I guess it's best if you're
You don't
behind
care.
it first. You know, you can run away. But it's the fellowship is the organization. Yeah, the fellowship is the name of the organization.
Okay.
It was started
Okay.
in 1936. You can
Really?
Google this. You can Google this on your phone. I do this all the time. So they've been around for a long time.
I did not know they were around.
Yeah.
Oh
They've been
my.
around for a long time. Well, 35 would have been Great Depression time when the anti-Roosevelt sentiment was growing.
And I
And
mean,
so,
and I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
But this sentiment comes about at a time when the president, even though America is not a socialist country, but the president implemented policies that
Yeah.
were very socialistic.
Yeah.
And
Socialist is
the whites were upset.
yeah.
Now there were some white people. I can't find this video anymore, but Abdus found it when during I think this was still during the Roosevelt administration. It might have been Eisenhower. Yeah, I think it was Roosevelt though. There was a video of, you know, just one of those man on the street kind of interviews, right? The president had just passed a stimulus bill where everybody in the country got a stimulus check, right? I can't remember how much check was for, but the person was interviewing this random lady that was at a parade that was commemorating the New Deal being passed, basically, them hearing about the New Deal being passed and the stimulus checks being a part of it. Everybody's going to get a stimulus check. You know, we're going to get everybody out of this horrible depression, blah, blah, blah. So the lady says, so the person interviewing the lady says, how do you feel about, you know, the money that you got from the president? And she said, I love it. It's great. I mean, we do so much for this country and the government does owe us. And, you know, so this is great. It's great that the government is doing something for us for once. So the guy asks her something like, what are you going to do with your money? She's like, oh, I'm going on vacation. She was no shame whatsoever. And she shouldn't have had any. She's like, oh, me and my husband, and we going on vacation. That's what we're doing with our stimulus check. And it struck me that, you know, I've had arguments with people about the New Deal and Dr. Reed. You know, the New Deal wasn't racist. The implementation, okay, maybe it wasn't written. There are no words in the New Deal legislation that says do not distribute these benefits to Negroes. There's nothing in the New Deal that says that. But there are stipulations in the New Deal that separates the population so much, the population that doesn't benefit or doesn't qualify for the benefits, separates the populations out that don't benefit so minutely, down to a level that is so minute. Only domestic workers and farm workers were denied Social Security benefits and other benefits in the New Deal, particularly monetary benefits in the New Deal. Most of those people were Black. All of them were not Black. Of course, there were white farm workers, there were white domestic workers, but the vast majority of those workers were Black.
Yes, exactly.
So, in a way, and that was intentional. If you wanted everybody to have the benefit to lift the whole country out of the depression, why did you make certain workers ineligible for the benefits? That didn't make any sense. That was obviously a racial caveat in the New Deal. They didn't have to say, don't give this to the Negroes. They did stuff like that. Or the states did the discriminating when they administered the legislation.
Mhm.
So, like, I realized that a lot of what white voters are afraid of in this country is us getting anything good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's part of it. And I think the part I do not understand, like, who are we afraid of? I'm kind of stuck where you are with that. You know what? Who are any of these people that we should be afraid of them? Yes, the police, the Democrats, as soon as they're unhappy with us, they call the police out on us and get them to arrest us and all that kind of stuff. They're just as fast on the draw calling 911 as Republicans are.
Mhm.
Right? So, okay, we know that about both parties. If we protest, we're going to get harassed and arrested. And it doesn't matter who the politician is. But
And the difference between Republicans and Democrats in terms of police violence is that the Republicans don't have any black faces to endorse their position.
they
The
don't.
Democrats can say, well, it's we're not racist because, see, we have black
Right. Look at all the
politicians
Negroes
who
we
agree
got.
that the police should be doing it. It's okay, you know. And
Uh-huh.
so the party that we are adhere to, we are drawn to by fear,
Mhm.
can always have people who look like us. What Zora Neale Hurston say, all my skin folk ain't my kinfolk, you know.
Mhm.
But they can hide behind folks who will endorse the racism, the Joe Bidens, and so forth, and say we should vote for him. The climber in South Carolina can say we know Joe and Joe knows us. You're right, Joe knows us, and he knows we ain't going nowhere. So, you know, that he knows. So you know, that's the only difference between the Democrat and Republicans. The Republicans don't have to pretend they like us. The
Nope.
Democrats.
Yep, that's really it. And you know, the country will still be here after either one of them wins.
Mhm.
Um, either one is a bad deal for all of us. I just, you know, they're equally horrible for some of the same reasons, but
Mhm.
they're also equally horrible for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And honestly, for me, it doesn't matter what the differences and similarities are, because the only thing that really matters that I hope people get from this particular moment in this country's history is that you don't have to take this. You do not have to settle for this as your government. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be this way at all. There are examples for better governments. They exist. Cuba, Venezuela. The only reason you think negatively about these countries is because the US media tells you to think
Right.
negatively about those countries. If capitalists and imperialists left Cuba and Venezuela and Russia alone,
Mhm.
Tanzania to develop their socialism, Vietnam to develop theirs. If the U.S. government had left those countries alone, they could never say that socialism and communism doesn't work, because they would, because nobody would be stopping them from working. So, I mean, I get that people will not probably go that far. That's why we organize to teach people these things. In Nicaragua, thank you, Ricky. Um, that's we have options, we have choices. Among those options and choices is to get the heck out of this country and see the rest of the world. Talk to some people in other places with different governments so they can tell you what they think of this government. I promise you, you'll be terrified. I
Mhm.
promise you. Every conversation I had with people in Cuba and Venezuela,
Mhm.
they were like, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for coming. Here, let me go show you this great thing. Let me show you that. Do you like this? Let me show you this. And at some point during the conversation, it's like, what is wrong with your government? Why do they hate
Mhm.
us so much?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every to a person. It's like, your government is evil. I literally had a lady in Cuba after she gave me some homemade moonshine. She's like, why is your government so evil? I'm like,
Right.
first of all, not my government.
Yeah.
Second, white
Yeah.
supremacy. I don't know what you. So,
Yeah.
you know, we have got to connect with people around the world. We got to stop being afraid to be around organizers, because I think that's a part of the fear too. Like, well, I don't want to be close to them because if the government comes after them, then I'm gonna be a target. You got to stop being afraid. You have to, because when this empire falls, Dr. Tauheed, it's not like they're going to leave anything in place, like a contingency plan for. I don't know what people think are going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, nothing is going to sprout up out of the ground organically. The people are going to have to develop what it is they want when this empire ends.
And you have to start now, because when it's falling, there's too much chaos. There's considerable chaos now, but we have some internal work to do in the Black community with our relationships between Black men and Black women, and our issues in terms of gender in general, and our issues in terms of class, in terms of how those who might be considered themselves elite think about those who are working folks. We used to all understand that we were all in the same boat. Now some of us think that we've arrived on the yacht, and we're
right,
and so forth. We have some internal work that we have to do, and this is becoming more and more a part of my thinking now, is that if we're going to meet the world as the world is, we can only do it as an intact community. We'll have differences, but family members always have differences.
Right.
But if you got a family, you realize that you got to stick together. It's your family going out to meet other families, and you can work with those other families, but you can't do it if you're disconnected and disunified in your own family. You'll just be exploited. So we have we have lots of internal conversations that we need to have. That's part of that process of organizing, but we have to organize within the Black family, and that includes, as you said, members of the Black family who are not in this country, right? From elsewhere, the African diaspora as well has to be part of that process.
Yeah, and I've been telling people that the situation in Niger is a really good example of what organizing internationally looks like, right? Because if people are familiar with the Black Alliance for Peace, we've been talking about Shutdown AFRICOM since the very beginning of the organization's founding, since 2017. It was one of the reasons the organization was founded, because people saw the destruction and devastation the U.S. military through AFRICOM was doing on the continent of Africa, and obviously getting the U.S. out of Africa is a necessary part of this anti-imperialist, anti-neocolonial struggle. So what happened in Niger this week, for people who didn't know, they demanded, now after kicking France out, spectacular, they have now demanded the U.S. get the hell out. Also spectacular. There is a small drone base in Niger that is staffed with like 1,000 or less U.S. troops.
Small base.
Yeah, but I mean, we know why, but I mean, that's you just, and so when these folks said the U.S. is here illegally, that's what they said. The U.S. military has their little drone base here illegally, and we want them to leave. Now, we're not going to harm the soldiers. That's what the spokesman said. The soldiers are safe. We're going to protect them. So gave his personal guarantee of safety for the soldiers while they were doing whatever they needed to do to get out. That nobody's going to attack the soldiers, but y'all need to go. And the U.S.'s response is no, we can work something else out. So they put forth this deal that they're not paying any attention to, but we had information from people on the ground in the Sahel about the things that were going on in the Sahel. It's stuff that was never reported on any U.S. media outlet. All of the protests in the Sahel countries against the governments that were removed by the military transition forces. Just people have been protesting these people for years, hundreds of thousands of people in the street, just like we don't know about the protests that happened in Haiti against U.S. intervention and foreign intervention. So we took the information we were getting from people in Africa, in Niger, and Mali, and Burkina Faso, and we communicate that information to our organization. We draft a statement with the information that we got, and we put that statement out for the masses to read. Then we educate people on this is what has happened this week or whatever in these countries. This is what it means. That's our role in international organization. Our role is to stay in touch with the forces on the ground around the world who are fighting imperialism and use the information they give us to educate our people here, but also use the information however those people want us to advance their struggle and to strengthen our struggle. So that's what we did when we didn't produce a press conference until they said they were comfortable for us publishing a press conference, because the things were still in motion, and they're like, well, let's just wait until things. We're like, fine, we'll wait. And when they gave us the go ahead, we released a press conference. We had the information in it that they wanted us to have in it. We sent the document back and forth, checked with them, made sure it was okay, and the information got delivered. Now nobody knows who we are connected to domestically or internationally, unless they look at, the lists of a bunch of demonstrations or whatever. But nobody really knows the kinds of connections BAP has with people on the continent and in other places. And that's a good thing, because nobody's supposed to know. That just the fact that there are people on the ground in Africa who have been on the ground in Africa, in these countries that we've been in contact with. You didn't know people were protesting over there, did you? That's the whole point. We have to get our information not from corporate media, not even from social media. We have to get our information from the people who are experiencing the issue, and they have to tell us what they want us to do with that information. And we do it. And we do it to support them, to raise consciousness of the people here about their plight, but also to remind ourselves they're our family. That's why we have this relationship with them. They're family. We are from those people. We are those people. Their fight is ours. So even when we protested in 2020, we find out like a couple of months after the first protests kick off here in the United States, we find out that people were protesting on the continent too. Then we see people all over the world protesting, right? But Africans were absolutely in the streets in some of these African countries talking about, I can't breathe. They don't speak English, but they have signs and protest signs, I can't breathe. So this is the work. This is the international work that organizing is. That is, there's nothing glamorous to it. There's no glamour to this. It really is. You are either passionate about improving the lot of all humanity on this planet and all living creatures, really, or you don't. You just want to make money. And if you just want to make money, you can't hang out with me, because you are orchestrating my death. So no, we can't be friends. But I can find all these other people over here who have the same principles as me and are just as weird and geeky and excited about this international solidarity and socialism stuff, and we organize. So this is what we do. And if you like what we do, if you appreciate it, please donate to BAP. I'm not going to do this often, but please donate to BAP, because like every other organization, look, we need money too. This work is not cheap. You got to get stuff printed. Staples is not going to accept a Black Power fist. They want a payment for their services. So, we need money to do these things, to hold these teach-ins, to pay for these platforms, to do these shows. This thing is a subscription, right? Every month, you got to pay this bill. Setting up teach-ins and town halls for the masses and providing people food if they come out to your event. because that's just a nice thing to do. It's how you draw people in, providing childcare, make sure parents can come. This stuff it's not cheap. So yeah, we absolutely need donations. Please donate to BAP. And continue to support Black Power Media. And Dr. Tauheed, I know you have some organizations that need some support from these people talking about they love you so much. Well, prove it.
Well, fortunately, I don't have a social media bill or a platform bill or a subscription to pay for. So no one needs to send me anything at the moment. Send it to Sister Jacqueline.
Okay, send it to me because I need some new clothes because all my clothes are too big now. So, well, Dr. Tauheed, thank you so much for coming back with us. We will be back on our schedule every third Friday. Now
there will always be things to talk about.
Always. And I feel like this election is just going to be a circus that we've never seen before, and none of us are going to like it.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be a revelation. I think it's going to be entertaining. It's going to be a watershed.
Yeah, it's going to be entertaining and revealing, and a whole lot of people are going to be like, "What?"
Yeah, and not only because of what's happening in this country, but what's happening internationally in the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. There's certainly a general awakening, if you will, that's occurring. At least it appears that way now. We could be too optimistic about that. But we are getting. We've mentioned, of course, climate change, and climate change doesn't care about our politics.
Not at all.
The climate is doing what it's doing, and things are getting worse. Have some connections to the Sunrise Movement, not much, but they're doing using some of my research, in fact, and some of the things that they're doing, and there are some young people who are making some waves, if you will, in Kansas City here and around the country, in some things. One of the things that they are campaigning for is that Kansas City has a free bus system. I think it was the first in the country that actually did that, and the research center that I'm the director of did the economic impact study of that. Which encouraged the city to do it. And then we also did a quality of life study looking at the improvement of the quality of life of people who were riding the bus, who, now can get on, the bus and go to the supermarket or go to their doctor or go to school to get a education or go to their jobs. And they are continuing that process of free bus transportation. And so, they're organized and they're doing things, and obviously Sunrise is more connected to environmental issues, but they're not forgetting the issues of the poor as well. So that's just one organization that I'm not officially connected to, but I was happy that some of my colleagues are, and that they're using some of my work to help them.
Well, that's good. I'm glad they are using some of your work because your scholarship is it's wonderful. It's necessary, and I know we all appreciate that you take the time to come here and break these issues down for us and with us that seem so complicated, but when you explain them, they're not. So
well, your questions and your insights are always right on track. So this is always a easy conversation, and it's always an enjoyable conversation, and I learned a lot too.
Well, good. I'm glad we import. Oh, that's right. I can't do that. Okay. Now I shared the link to donate to BAP, but I forgot we are making in the middle of a transition, so you can't donate right now.
Okay.
I think it should be fixed this weekend, I believe. So don't worry, I'm gonna give you the you'll get the link again. It'll be fixed then, and then you can donate. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. 512 people watching. 512.
Wow. All
I
right.
do not know how that happened, but thank you all for watching very much. This is Dr. Linwood Tauheed every third Friday of the month, part of Luqman Nation's Friday double feature Fridays. Since this is what I'm the way I'm doing it now, so I don't do too much,
Mm-hmm.
and I can get my rest.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm going to do after this show. But I wanted to, once again, I really cannot thank you all enough. And I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Tauheed, because the people have been asking me, when are you coming back with Dr. Tauheed? I'm like, what? I'm sick.
We want you to get your rest, and you look rested and full of energy, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is quite a woo, what a journey.
Yeah.
That's a conversation for another day. Thank y'all. It is 8:00 on the dot. Thank y'all so much for sticking around with us on this little extended show. Didn't mean to keep Dr. Tauheed this long, but it's been a while since we've been away, so you know how we have to catch up.
Yes.
All right, y'all. Appreciate you so much. If you are not a supporter of Black Power Media, why don't you go ahead and subscribe, get that done, get that taken care of. You can support Black Power Media through Patreon, patreon.com/Black Power Media, but you can also support Luqman Nation through Patreon, patreon.com/Luqman Nation, where I'm tending to drop all of my videos and interviews and stuff there in my Patreon. So there'll be some other extra stuff for my patrons. That's it. Got a meeting tomorrow. I think some outreach. Maybe I'm going to try to get out and do some outreach, do some organizing stuff. And then I'm going to play in my garden. I hope you all do something good for you this weekend. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. And as always, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But if we keep fighting, I promise, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace, y'all.